Why do we feel such urgency to explain who we are? And what if that seemingly harmless habit were actually a subtle form of submission? Have you ever wondered what would happen if you simply stopped justifying yourself? What you resist persists. Carl Jung. Most of our explanations are nothing but excuses wearing a mask. Have you ever tried to say no without justifying it? Have you dared to feel sadness without hiding it behind a social smile? Have you been able to restrain the impulse to explain your absence, your mood, your silence? It feels like something tightens in your chest, doesn't it? An almost physical discomfort, as if you were committing a crime by simply existing without asking for permission. All of us at some point were taught in subtle, almost invisible ways that our worth depends on the understanding of others, that we only have the right to feel if we are understood, that we can only exist if we explain ourselves. But what if I told you that this is a prison with invisible bars, where the key to freedom is not in convincing others, but in no longer trying? Carl Jung, that cartographer of the human soul, warned us. The compulsion to justify oneself is not kindness, it is a symptom, a wound, an absence of self, the proof that we are living to be accepted instead of living to be whole. This is not a self-help manual. It is a mirror, a dark but necessary mirror, and in it you may recognize the face of your own daily surrender, the one that occurs every time you say, "Sorry, it's just the way I am." Every time you try to appear reasonable just so you won't be rejected. Today, we are going down into that dark basement of the psyche. We are going to light a candle in the space where the ego tries to please and the true self keeps silent. And maybe, just maybe, you will discover what happens when you stop explaining yourself. This is not taught in schools, but there is a silent theater dominating most human relationships, a theater where the script is always the same. Please understand me. It is subtle, almost elegant. You say, "Sorry if I was distant. I just had a rough day." "Oh, I'm not acting strange. I'm just tired." But what is really behind all those explanations? What we say when we justify ourselves constantly is not simply a description of facts. Deep down, we are begging, "Do not reject me for being who I am." And that is more profound than it seems. Carl Jung saw that behavior as a direct reflection of the disconnection from the self. The one who compulsively explains is already betraying himself. Because think about it, someone who lives connected to their truth does not need another's approval to exist. Constant explanation is a plea for absolution. It is as if each justification were an attempt to say, "Let me exist without punishment." But living by asking permission to be is the opposite of freedom, and even more, the opposite of integrity. When you explain yourself all the time, your inner compass begins to spin, disoriented. You no longer know if you made that decision because you truly wanted to, or just because you didn't want to be misinterpreted. You no longer know if you stayed silent because it was right, or because you couldn't find an acceptable reason to speak. This is the beginning of the prison. An elegant prison with soft carpets and polite smiles, but a prison nonetheless. There you live under the gaze of the other. You wake up and you put on the character. And worse still, you begin to believe that this character is you. But is it normal to explain yourself? You could say, yes, it is. But what is normal can also be tragic. Normal is silencing your discomfort to maintain harmony. Normal is smiling when you really want to scream. Normal is living apologizing for existing as you are. And it is precisely that normality which must be questioned. When you begin to observe this pattern in yourself, something shifts. You realize that many times your words are not expression, but defense. Defense against judgment, against abandonment, against the disapproving gaze. You are not speaking. You are trying to survive. Compulsive explanation is an armor, but it does not protect. It imprisons. And the more you explain, the less you listen to yourself, the less you feel, the less you are. Jung called this self-abandonment. It is when you drift so far from your essence that you no longer remember the sound of your own inner voice. And here lies the cruelest part. The world rewards this behavior. People love the one who explains. They love the one who apologizes for being sensitive, who justifies their intensity, who softens their boundaries with a smile. You become pleasant. But at what price? At the price of your truth, your silence, your peace. And that is why, when you begin to be silent, not from omission, but from integrity, the world becomes uncomfortable. People step back. They start asking, "Are you okay?" As if your silence were an act of violence. But it is not. It is an act of rebirth. Because when you stop explaining yourself, you return to belonging to yourself. And that changes everything. Now there is something you need to know. Has it ever happened to you that just when you most need to remain calm, your mind collapses? That loss of control is not only emotional, it is mental. It occurs because most people were trained to feel before thinking, to react before observing. The problem is structural. No one taught us to train the mind like a muscle. That is why each small frustration becomes an explosion, and each challenge an inner defeat. But there is another way to operate, a structure based on neuroscience, applied philosophy, and silent mental practices that reprogram how you respond and place you back in command. The need to explain yourself does not begin in adulthood. It is a seed that was planted long before you even understood words. It was sown in moments you barely remember, in fragments of early life when your crying annoyed someone who was supposed to comfort you, when your sadness was called an exaggeration, when your curiosity or excitement was met with impatience or dismissal. It began in that early territory where feeling was not celebrated but questioned, where expressing yourself felt dangerous and being understood became a matter of survival. Childhood, far from being only a playground of innocence, is also the first landscape where emotional betrayals take root. And these betrayals are not always violent or spectacular. They come quietly, almost invisibly, through a disapproving glance, a phrase uttered in haste, a silence so cold it deafens. They come in sentences that cut like glass. Swallow that cry. Stop making a scene. That's no reason to behave like that. You're too sensitive. Maybe you've heard some of these phrases. If you have, you already know the wound. You already know the weight of learning, far too early, that you must shrink to be safe. Carl Jung understood this origin with striking clarity. For him, the psyche is not only formed by what happens to us, but also, often more profoundly, by what we were not allowed to live, to feel, to express. A childhood where emotions are punished teaches a single, powerful lesson. Do not be your whole self. The child who hears that anger is ugly learns to smile outwardly while burning inside. The child who is ridiculed for fear learns to act brave and to feel shame for his own instinct to protect himself. The child whose pain is ignored or minimized begins to believe he will only be heard if he is convincing, logical, and justifiable. And from there, the addiction to explaining oneself is born. It becomes not just a habit, but a survival strategy, a way of avoiding punishment, of preventing abandonment, of keeping love within reach, even if you must contort yourself to do it. That child grows into an adult, but carries within an invisible judge, internalized, always whispering, "Explain yourself, or you will be left. Be reasonable, or you will be rejected. Do not feel so much. Do not disturb so much. Do not be too much." And the most painful part is that for a while, it works. You explain yourself, and people like you. You soften your edges, and people find you easy to handle. You adapt, and the world applauds you. But inside, something begins to wither. Each explanation seems to shave off a small piece of your spontaneity. Each attempt to be understood costs a fragment of your freedom, until one day you wake up exhausted, not of the world, but of yourself. Exhausted from silencing your own truth, from rehearsing your words so they won't disturb anyone, from feeling shame for simply having feelings. And here lies the cruelest twist. So often, the people who demanded the most explanations from you in childhood were the very people who wanted to love you. That contradiction creates a wound that splits the soul. The love that should have been a home became an arena. You learned that to be loved, you had to be convincing, as if love were a courtroom and you were always on trial, defending your right to exist, to feel, to hurt, always trying to prove that your pain is legitimate, that your silence has a reason, that your presence has value. But what if I told you that you no longer need to fight for that love? That the constant need to explain yourself is not empathy, but a symptom of emotional neglect. The truth is that no one should ever have to justify their feelings. You feel, and that is enough. You exist, and that is sufficient. Yet that awareness does not appear on its own. It must be cultivated. It must be rescued from the ruins of childhood. Because back there, in the moment you were silenced, something broke. And yet here, perhaps for the first time, you can begin to listen to what that silenced child wanted to say. That child did not want approval. He wanted containment. He did not need to be understood intellectually. He needed to be seen, felt, accepted, even when he seemed exaggerated, strange, or inconvenient. And that containment begins now. In the silence, you allow yourself to hold without fear. In the tear that rolls down your cheek without explanation. In the anger that pulses without guilt. In the sadness that breathes without needing subtitles. This is the first gesture of reintegration of the self. This is where Carl Jung's teachings come alive. The self is not something to be earned or proven. It is something to be reclaimed. Allowing your emotions to be what they are, without defense, without justification, without censorship, is the moment the inner exile begins to come home. And as you practice this, the cycle begins to reverse. What was once automatic, explaining yourself, softening yourself, justifying yourself, starts to feel absurd. You start to notice that you are more whole when you are not trying to please, more alive when you are not trying to be interpreted correctly, more authentic when you are not asking permission to exist. In that instant, the silent child within you smiles because finally someone heard him, and that someone is you. Imagine a scene. The lights come on, the curtain rises, there you are, the audience is full. Family, friends, colleagues, lovers, strangers, all waiting for your performance. And you, without even realizing it, begin to act. You smile when you want to stay silent. You nod when everything in you screams, no. You justify yourself. You bend. You dim your own light. all to maintain a harmony that was never yours to begin with. That stage is life, as lived by someone who has lost the axis of their own being. And that molded, polished, domesticated character is the ego, trying to survive in a world where being yourself feels like a threat. Carl Jung taught that the ego should be a bridge between the inner world and the outer world, but when the bridge lives only for the traffic coming from outside, it forgets where it leads. The ego ceases to be an instrument and becomes a mask. And the most tragic thing? That mask receives applause. You become that person, easy to handle, mature, rational, but inside, something dies. Because every time you say yes, while wanting to say no, the body feels it, the soul contracts, the heart betrays it with a knot, a fatigue, a restlessness you cannot name. And it is in that repetition that the ego disconnects from the self. It is no longer a channel. It becomes a puppet moved by the invisible strings of others' expectations. Soon, you begin not to know who you are, because everything you think, feel, choose, passes first through a filter. Will they understand me? Will they like me? Will they reject me? That theater of acceptance is not made of applause. It is built from fear. Fear of being truly seen. Fear of being rejected in your entirety. Fear that if you show yourself without masks, no one will stay. And so you stay on stage, act perfectly, and receive the applause. But alone in the dressing room, you cry. Because the ego may be the star, but the self is the director no one sees. And when it realizes it has been forgotten, it begins to sabotage the show. Anxiety creeps in, insomnia, emptiness, that sense that life is passing by, but you are not really in it. And then you begin to ask yourself, why am I so tired when everything seems fine? Why do I feel so lonely, even when surrounded by people? Why am I so afraid of disappointing others? Those questions are the whisper of the self, trying to wake you from the hypnosis, reminding you that you did not come into the world to be understood. You came to be whole. But leaving that theater is not easy. It feels like tearing off your own skin. You will disappoint others. You will lose applause. You will make people uncomfortable. They will call you selfish, ungrateful, complicated. But that is only because now you are beginning to stop acting. And those who controlled you with conditional affection will realize they have lost their grip. And although the path back to yourself is raw, it is also sacred. Because in walking it, you are not becoming someone new. You are becoming who you were before you were told you were too much. You are not building a new self. You are allowing the original self to step back onto the stage, not to perform, but to live. The ego that once lived to please now begins to doubt. Do I truly have to be so kind? And if my empathy was really fear of rejection, what if my silence was not peace, but fear of conflict? These doubts hurt, yet they also liberate. Because when the ego stops pretending, the self begins to speak, and it speaks firmly, clearly, with a voice you may not have heard for years, but that was always there, waiting for you to stop explaining so you could finally listen. And the strangest part is that slowly you discover something no one told you. You do not need to convince anyone to be loved. You do not need to justify every feeling to be respected. You do not need to prove anything to deserve to exist. You only need to step off the stage, even if it means walking through darkness for a time, even if the audience leaves, even if the silence frightens you. Because it is in that silence, away from the spotlights, where you meet the only presence that never left you, yourself. There is a silence that heals and a silence that destroys. But there is a third kind, a silence that confronts. It does not announce itself. It does not slam the table. It does not demand respect. It simply imposes itself. It is the silence born when you stop explaining. Not from pride, not from anger, but because for the first time you understand that you owe nothing to anyone, not an excuse for existing, not an argument for being. And when that silence comes, it is frightening, not to you who finally breathes, but to those who fed on your doubt. Because look, while you explained yourself, people knew how to bend you. They knew which emotion to press to get answers. They knew that by questioning you, you would run to justify yourself. But now, with that silence, the game changes. There are no easy paths to your center anymore. No emotional maneuvers can open your defenses. You are no longer an open book. You are a sacred temple, and for many, that is intolerable. Carl Jung understood this. He said that the process of individuation demands rupture, not because you wish to break, but because your integrity becomes unbearable for those who only knew how to relate to your submission. You start to say no, and you do not explain. You change your mind, and you give no reasons. You leave, and you do not write an emotional testament to ease another's pain. And do you know what happens? The silence screams, but not inside you, in others. They ask, "Why are you like this? What did I do?" You will not even explain, but you breathe steady, present, whole, because now you understand. If someone only understands you when you explain yourself, they never truly saw you. Silence becomes a revolution when it interrupts the cycle of emotional manipulation, when it breaks the inverted symmetry of relationships where you had to defend yourself for feeling, for changing, for being. That silence confronts, because it reveals who stood by your side out of affinity and who was there only because they could control you. It is like turning off the music and realizing the dance had no meaning, like switching on the light and seeing that the place where you smiled was actually a decorated cell. And then you understand you are not losing people, you are losing roles, and with them, the silent agreements that kept you small. The revolution of silence is radical, not because it destroys, but because it reorganizes, it redraws your contours, and forces the world to meet you again without a script, without a mask, without editing. But there is a cost, because the silence will also provoke you, tempt you, call you back to the old script. At first, you almost give in. Your body trembles, your throat tightens, your mind screams, "Explain." You will look insensitive, cold, distant, but you stay, and that staying is sacred. It is there that inner authority is born, the firm core of being that no longer needs to prove itself. Carl Jung called this the psychological center. It is the point where the self stabilizes. It does not become rigid, but it becomes non-negotiable. And then, curiously, silence stops being confrontation and becomes presence. You walk into a place, and you no longer need to say much. People feel it. They perceive someone who does not beg for understanding, who does not bow before judgment, who does not dance to expectation. And that imposes respect, not a forced respect built on fear, but the real respect that rises from the perception of integrity. Because when you stop explaining yourself, something inside you stops fragmenting, and everything around you must reorganize. The world does not handle that kind of silence well, because it breaks the rules of the social game. It says, "I do not need you to like it. I do not need you to understand. I simply am." And to be at that level is a revolution without noise, without banners, without speeches, only presence, only silence, only truth. Have you ever seen someone enter a place and without saying a single word, completely change the energy of the room? Not from arrogance, not from imposed authority, but from a kind of presence that needs no announcement. That is the power of one who has stopped explaining, of one who has reached the psychological integrity that Carl Jung called individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are without apologizing for it. And that integrity cannot be faked because it is not in the speech, it is in the gesture, in the gaze, in the silence that says, I first listen to myself, and that is enough. Reaching that point, however, is not a miracle. It is excavation, a long and brave path, often solitary. It requires confronting everything that taught you to live for others. Above all, it requires recovering trust in yourself, because what sustains the compulsion to explain is not only fear of rejection, it is the fear of being wrong about yourself, of not being sure if your feelings are valid, of not fully believing that your truth deserves space, even if no one likes it. And that is why psychological integrity is silent but dense. It does not shout, it does not impose, but it is like a deep root. No one sees it, but it holds everything. You begin to notice that integrity in small gestures. When you say no without remorse, when you feel discomfort and you do not try to rationalize it, when you leave a place without needing to justify yourself, when you trust your intuition even without evidence. You no longer need to be understood because you already understand yourself, and that change resonates. Relationships change. The kind of conversations you tolerate changes. The way people treat you changes because you stopped being moldable and became someone who inhabits themselves. Carl Jung said, the psyche is like a living system. When there is imbalance, it produces symptoms, but when there is alignment, it produces presence. The presence of someone who does not beg for attention, who does not need applause, who does not live for others' interpretations. And that is what begins to emanate from you. People feel it and start treating you differently, not because you became superior, but because you became complete. And there is something magnetic in someone who refuses to explain, not as defense, but as an existential stance, as one who says, I no longer adapt to what they expect. I belong to what I am. That integrity is revolutionary because it deactivates control games, dismantles relationships built on guilt, and begins a new kind of bond, one formed between two integrities and not between lack and approval. But beware, integrity is not rigidity. It is rooted flexibility. It is being able to listen to another without dissolving. It is saying, that does not resonate with me, without needing to construct an elaborate argument. It is acting with kindness, but without betraying yourself. You do not need to explain your boundaries. You hold them. You do not need to defend your feelings. You inhabit them. You do not need to convince anyone. You no longer negotiate your essence. And as that stance strengthens, you feel less anxiety, less need to control how others see you, less fear of being misunderstood. Because you understood, respect does not arise from effort. Respect arises from presence, and presence arises from truth. Yours is the kind that does not need subtitles, that cannot be contained in justification, that simply is. Perhaps the hardest part is not stopping explaining yourself, but accepting that you never needed to. You did not come into the world to be understood. You came to be whole. When you silence the need to convince, something awakens inside you. It is not pride, it is sovereignty. It is the silent return to the place where your strength always was, in you. And I know this because I lived the opposite. For a long time, I bent to fit, edited myself to please, explained everything, until one of those days when the soul gets tired, I said nothing, and for the first time, I was truly heard. Sometimes silence is the only sound the world respects. If this reached something inside you, it is because perhaps, like me, you are also tired of asking permission to be. So breathe, stay in silence, and belong to yourself. Thank you for being here, for not running from the truth, for walking with me in this whisper of the early hours between sanity and delirium, where what we are lives when no one sees us. Now leave a comment with that explanation you want to release. Like this if it confronted you. Subscribe, because here we do not promise answers, only inner revolutions. And that video appearing on the screen now, watch it if you have the courage, but I warn you, after it, you may never be able to hide from yourself again. Carl Jung, one of the greatest explorers of the human psyche, left us a profound message, one that echoes in the hidden corridors of our unconscious mind. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This truth doesn't just speak to the mysteries of the mind, it touches the very essence of our emotional lives. Especially in the realm of love and relationships, this teaching becomes a beacon of insight. Because the way we love, the way we connect with others, is not random. It's not luck or misfortune. It's not simply that we fall for someone by chance. The truth is far more intimate and confronting. Our relationships are mirrors. What we experience in love is, in many ways, the purest reflection of what lies within us. When love feels shallow, repetitive, or painful, it is rarely a coincidence. It's often a symptom, a sign that we are deeply disconnected from ourselves. If we haven't ventured into the darker parts of our being, if we haven't taken the time to embrace our inner world in its entirety, the beautiful, the broken, the shadowed, we are likely to find ourselves stuck in cycles of unfulfilling, even destructive relationships. Have you ever asked yourself why it seems like you attract the same kind of partner over and over again? Why you seem to live out the same emotional patterns, as if you're trapped in an endless loop? Jung provides a powerful answer. We attract what we are. More precisely, we attract people and dynamics that resonate with our deepest, often unconscious beliefs. Imagine for a moment that you are a magnet. Your energetic field, what you believe, what you fear, what you carry from the past, has a frequency, and this frequency draws in experiences that match it. If you carry unresolved fear deep inside you, you'll attract situations that reinforce that fear. If you carry childhood wounds of feeling invisible or unloved, you might unconsciously seek relationships that make you beg for attention, that echo your past hurts. This isn't a curse. It's not some cruel cosmic punishment. It's an opportunity, a powerful invitation to grow. Jung called this the process of individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming whole, of integrating every lost or rejected piece of who we are, so we no longer project our inner wounds onto the world around us, especially onto the people we claim to love. The tragedy is that most people search for love before ever forming a healthy relationship with themselves. They want someone else to heal them, to complete them, to fill the voids they never dared to face. But no partner, no matter how kind or devoted, can do that work for you. The other is not your savior. They are a mirror that will show you, sometimes gently, sometimes painfully, everything you've yet to confront within yourself. When you do not fully love yourself, you settle. You accept crumbs and convince yourself it's a feast. You mistake suffering for passion, endurance for loyalty. You believe love is about enduring pain, about sacrificing your needs, about losing yourself in another. But that is not love. That is fear. The fear of being alone, the fear of not being good enough, the fear of facing the silence of your own soul. And fear has never built anything real. It does not create healthy, lasting bonds. Fear breeds attachment, dependency, and ultimately, suffering. This is where Jung introduces us to one of his most powerful concepts, the shadow. The shadow is everything we've repressed, denied, or refused to acknowledge in ourselves. It's not just the painful memories or the shameful moments. It's also our strength, our raw authenticity, the parts of us we were told to hide. In relationships, the shadow creeps in quietly. It shows up in our jealousy, in our constant need to argue or control, in our patterns of submission or silence. When we don't integrate our shadow, we end up projecting it onto the person we love. We blame them for our unhappiness. We put them on a pedestal, then tear them down when they disappoint us. But what we see in them is often just a reflection of our own fragmented self. So, if you want to stop living out mediocre love stories, if you want to experience a love that's deep, conscious, and transformative, you have to do what most people avoid. Look inward. Ask yourself the hard questions. Explore your history. Face your wounds. Examine your fears. Get radically honest about the relationship you have with yourself. Because here's the truth. The love you give and the love you allow yourself to receive will never exceed the love you have for yourself. If inside you there is scarcity, you will attract scarcity. If you carry rejection within you, you will call in people who reject you. But if you cultivate wholeness, if you do the inner work to know and embrace every part of yourself, you will naturally attract a love that mirrors that same completeness. And here lies the ultimate revelation. When you truly love yourself, you stop tolerating anything that doesn't align with your worth. You no longer settle for emotional scraps. You no longer beg for attention or validation. You know who you are. You know what you deserve. And you are no longer willing to compromise that truth. This doesn't mean that love becomes effortless or without challenges. But now, you walk the path of love with clarity, with boundaries, with power. You choose partners from a place of abundance, not need. You enter relationships as a whole being, not a half searching for completion. People who genuinely love themselves are not afraid of solitude. They understand that solitude is not a punishment. It's a sacred space for growth, for self-discovery, for deep transformation. It is from this inner abundance that true love is born. Not from desperation, not from lack, but from the overflowing essence of a soul that has already found home within itself. So, if you've ever felt that love has wounded you, that you gave your all and were left empty in return, remember this: love does not hurt. What hurts is attachment. What hurts is the absence of boundaries. What hurts is being disconnected from your own heart, from your own truth. What hurts is giving yourself away before truly knowing who you are. But the beauty is this: it can be healed, it can be transformed, and it all begins with a simple but powerful decision: to stop running from yourself and to finally turn inward. Because when you do, you'll find that the love you've always been searching for was never in someone else's arms. It was within you all along. Carl Jung reminds us of a profound truth. The journey to wholeness does not lie outside of us, but within. The key is not to find someone who will love us, but to become someone who truly and deeply loves themselves. Because when that shift happens, when you start inhabiting your own authenticity and fully embrace every part of who you are. Love stops being a struggle or a need to be fulfilled. It becomes a conscious choice, a sacred alignment. The universe does not respond to your wishes, it responds to your being. And if your being is whole, integrated, and filled with self-love, then what you will attract into your life will reflect that very same frequency. You won't draw in superficial affection or temporary companionship. You'll magnetize a love that is real, one that doesn't wear masks, doesn't play games, and is free of mediocrity. A love that is deep, transformative, and rooted in truth. Because when you truly love yourself, when you have confronted your shadows and integrated even the most hidden parts of your soul, you are no longer afraid of releasing what doesn't nourish you, what doesn't uplift you, what doesn't resonate with your truth. And that's where the real magic begins. It begins when you stop clinging to what was never meant for you, when you start trusting that you deserve more, when you choose your peace over your fear. In that sacred act of letting go, the universe listens. The right doors open, the right people appear. What once seemed impossible suddenly becomes your new reality. Because life, every relationship, every opportunity, every experience is a reflection of your inner state. If there is love inside of you, then what you will find on the outside can only mirror that. So the real question becomes, are you ready? Ready to love yourself fully? Ready to release what no longer resonates with you? Ready to build a relationship that begins in wholeness, not in lack? The answer lies within you. When you begin to love yourself without conditions, you undergo a radical shift in how you connect with others. You stop seeking validation from the outside world because you've learned how to validate yourself. You no longer beg for affection or attention because you understand that true love is never something to be begged for. It flows freely where it is meant to be. You no longer cling to relationships that drain your energy because you've discovered that inner peace is worth far more than any toxic companionship. This is a deep transformation of consciousness, one that changes everything. Jung taught that our relationships are the clearest mirrors of our unconscious. Everything that bothers you in others, everything you admire, and everything you fear losing is, in fact, a projection of something within yourself. This means the love you attract is a direct reflection of your level of consciousness. If you feel insecure, you will attract partners who trigger that insecurity. If you feel unworthy, your relationships will reflect that lack, making you feel like you're never enough. But if you feel whole, if you love yourself with authenticity and fullness, then the love that comes into your life will be an extension of that self-love. Here lies the great paradox. Most people are searching for love outside themselves, unaware that real love begins within. Many go from one relationship to another, hoping that someone else will give them what they have not yet given themselves. But this only leads to frustration, to pain, to the aching feeling of emptiness. Jung reminds us that the process of individuation, the sacred journey of integrating all parts of the self, is the only path toward living authentically. And in matters of love, this means no longer looking outward for what can only be found inward. When you truly love yourself, you become selective with your energy, not out of arrogance, but out of understanding. You begin to recognize that not every connection is healthy. You start to notice patterns you once ignored, red flags that used to pass by unnoticed. You feel with clarity when a bond is based on dependency and when it is based on growth. You no longer feel the need to fix others because you have realized that everyone has their own journey, their own timing. You stop settling for less than what you deserve because you have learned to give yourself the best. And in this understanding arises a truth that many are afraid to face. Most people fear being alone, not because solitude is unbearable, but because in the silence of their own company, they must face their shadows. It is easier to distract oneself with relationships, with validation from others, with the noise of the world, than it is to sit quietly and look within. But if you cannot dare to know yourself, to embrace both your light and your darkness, how can you expect to build a love that is true? Jung once said that love truly begins when the mask falls off, when we stop playing a role just to please others, and instead dare to show up as we really are, without fear of being rejected. That moment of vulnerability, when you choose authenticity over performance, is the true gateway to love. And it's not an easy path. Society teaches us to perform, to adapt, to mold ourselves into what others expect. But Jung's insight reminds us that love cannot flourish in pretense. It only grows in truth. You may have noticed that when someone doesn't have a good relationship with themselves, they inevitably project their inner conflicts onto the people around them. A person who hasn't made peace with their own emotions or traumas tends to bring chaos into their relationships, not because they are bad or unlovable, but because they are operating from wounds that haven't yet healed. People who are dominated by fear, by insecurity, or by a desperate need for control end up creating dynamics of pain and suffering with others. Their relationships become cycles of argument, jealousy, manipulation, and emotional instability. And this isn't because love is inherently difficult. It's not. It's because the people involved have not yet done the inner work needed to love in a healthy, conscious way. Until you embark on the journey of self-knowledge and healing, you'll keep finding yourself in the same situations, attracting the same emotional lessons, just wrapped in different faces. It will seem like you're repeating history over and over, without realizing that the common thread is within you. But when you begin to love yourself fully, deeply, and without conditions, everything changes. You not only transform the way you relate to yourself, but also the quality of the connections you build with others. Because healthy love isn't a battlefield. It's not a space of constant sacrifice or emotional exhaustion. It's not about losing yourself in someone else or trying to be what they want. True, healthy love is growth. It's freedom. It's expansion. It's choosing to be with someone not because you're afraid of being alone, not because you're trying to fill an emotional void, but because you genuinely want to share your life with them. You want to build something together from a place of wholeness, not from need. And in order to reach that kind of love, you must first cultivate a peaceful, fulfilling relationship with yourself. You have to be able to enjoy your own company and feel at ease in your own presence. You have to learn how to meet your own needs, to value yourself, to respect yourself, to choose yourself. Jung said that most people aren't truly aware of their own consciousness. That is, they react to life and relationships automatically, without understanding where their emotions or behaviors come from. In love, this unconsciousness manifests as fear-based attachment, desperate need, or harmful idealization. It creates relationships where people are trying to heal their wounds through someone else. But when you truly love yourself, you become more self-aware. You stop seeking love to save you. You're no longer hoping that someone else will come and fix what's broken inside you. Instead, you look for a partner who complements your life, not because you are incomplete, but because you recognize the beauty of sharing your journey with someone who has also done their own healing. However, to get to this place, you must first confront your shadow. You have to ask yourself the hard questions. Why have I accepted less than I deserve? What do I really believe about love, about relationships, about what it means to be with someone? Because many of those beliefs aren't even yours. You inherited them from your family, from society, from past experiences that left emotional scars. If you don't examine and challenge these beliefs, you'll keep reliving the same emotional patterns. You'll find yourself in relationships that feel familiar but unfulfilling, because deep down, you're repeating the same story, just with different characters. But when you begin to love yourself completely, something incredible happens. You stop looking outward for validation, for approval, for love. You realize that everything you are seeking in others already exists within you. You no longer need someone to tell you you're worthy, because you know it. You no longer need to be chosen, because you choose yourself every single day. And that kind of inner security changes everything. It changes how you walk through the world. It changes the way you speak, the way you set boundaries, the way you love. You no longer operate from scarcity, but from abundance. You stop seeking approval and start radiating authenticity. And when you are vibrating at that level of authenticity, you naturally attract people who have also done the inner work, people who love themselves, who won't drain your energy, who will support your growth. That's why the key to avoiding mediocre love isn't about finding the right person. It's about becoming the right person. It's not about fixing others. It's about healing the relationship you have with yourself. Because ultimately, your experience of love is just a mirror reflecting who you are and how you perceive yourself. When you truly love yourself, when you've embraced your shadow, when you've let go of the need to be rescued, love stops being a power struggle. It becomes a deep, soul-level connection. It becomes a gift, not a burden. It no longer feels like a battle or a never-ending sacrifice. Love becomes simple, nourishing, expansive. But for that to happen, you must first learn how to love yourself in that same way. If you've been settling for relationships that don't fulfill you, if you've believed that love always comes with pain, or that you'll never find the right person, I want you to remember this. The love you're searching for is already within you. You don't have to chase it. You don't have to earn it. You just have to awaken it. And when you do, everything changes. Because when you love yourself completely, when you truly see, value, and respect yourself, you stop accepting anything that isn't aligned with your truth. And that's when you begin to attract the kind of love you always deserved. But the first step is yours to take. Are you ready to love yourself fully? Are you willing to face your shadows, to leave behind mediocre love, and open your heart to a relationship that reflects your highest self? The choice is yours. When you love yourself completely, you not only change the way you relate to others, you change the way you experience life itself. You stop seeing love as a desperate need, and you start seeing it as a conscious choice. You're no longer in a rush to find someone, because you understand that the most important connection is the one you have with your own essence. You're not looking to be completed by someone else, because you've discovered that you are already whole. Those who haven't done this inner work tend to cling to relationships that bring them suffering. They stay where they are not valued. They settle for less than they deserve. They excuse behavior they know, deep down, they shouldn't tolerate. But that doesn't happen by accident. Carl Jung would explain that many of the patterns we unconsciously repeat in our relationships stem from the way we've been programmed to perceive love, not as something abundant and fulfilling, but as something scarce and conditional. From a young age, many of us have been conditioned to equate love with suffering, with sacrifice, and with the need to earn affection rather than simply receive it. This distorted perspective doesn't come from a place of wholeness, but from a deep-rooted lack, specifically a lack of self-love. When self-love is absent, we become vulnerable. We start accepting crumbs of affection, mistaking them for genuine connection, and in many cases, our own mind tricks us into believing that the pain we experience in relationships is normal. We begin to associate love with struggle, with longing, with the idea that real love always hurts. But the truth is, what actually hurts is the disconnection we feel from our own essence. The real suffering comes not from loving another, but from abandoning ourselves in the process. Love, in its truest form, was never meant to be about sacrificing ourselves for someone who doesn't value us. It's not about losing our identity in another person in a desperate attempt to keep a relationship afloat. According to Jungian psychology, what we're really doing in such cases is projecting an unhealed wound onto our partner. Often this wound originates in childhood. Perhaps we didn't feel loved enough, or maybe we grew up in homes where affection was conditional, inconsistent, or entirely absent. And so, without even realizing it, we go on a subconscious quest to find the love we never received. In that search, we might cling to people who reflect the same dysfunctions we witnessed growing up. We recreate familiar dynamics, not because they're healthy, but because they're known. This is why healing the relationship we have with ourselves is the only path toward attracting a truly healthy love. Because the world we see outside is always a mirror of the world we carry inside. When you begin to love yourself, truly, deeply, unapologetically, you start to notice something incredible. Many of the relationships you once tolerated simply no longer resonate with who you are becoming. The dynamics of pain, dependency, and emotional manipulation begin to lose their grip on you. And although this shift can feel uncomfortable at first, almost like shedding an old skin, you begin to experience a sense of peace, an inner calm that you never knew was possible. You no longer crave to be chosen by someone else, because you've already chosen yourself. You don't wait around for others to validate your worth, because you now know you are enough. And this inner transformation changes everything. Self-love isn't just a pretty concept or a motivational phrase you stick on your mirror. It's a real energy, a frequency you emit. People who genuinely love themselves radiate a different kind of presence. It's not arrogance, it's not superiority, it's quiet confidence, it's inner security. It's the serenity of knowing you don't have to chase, cling, or prove yourself, because what is meant for you will find its way to you, effortlessly and in divine timing. It's the trust in being okay with solitude, because your own company no longer feels like a void, but a sanctuary. It's the strength to say no to what doesn't nourish your soul, because you finally realized you deserve more. And when you carry this kind of energy, your entire reality shifts. People see you differently. Opportunities align more organically. And the relationships you attract are more authentic, more respectful, and more aligned with your true self. When you respect yourself, others will reflect that respect back to you. When you value yourself, others will value you too. When you choose yourself first, life starts placing people in your path who will also choose you, not out of need, not out of fear of being alone, but from a place of genuine, wholehearted love. But this level of transformation doesn't come without effort. It requires courage. It demands radical honesty. You have to look at yourself and recognize all the times you settled for less than you deserved. You have to admit when you accepted mistreatment because you feared being alone. And then, most importantly, you have to decide to make a different choice. It means walking away from relationships that drain you, even when it hurts. It means setting boundaries, even if others don't understand or accept them. It means no longer justifying the unjustifiable and putting yourself first, without guilt. Not because you don't care about others, but because you finally care enough about yourself. This journey is not easy. Jung described the path to individuation, the process of becoming your true, authentic self, as a difficult but necessary awakening. It forces us to face the parts of ourselves we've hidden, rejected, or suppressed for years. But it is precisely in that confrontation that the true transformation takes place. It is there, in the fire of self-awareness, that we stop being fragmented versions of ourselves and become whole. And from that place of wholeness, love takes on an entirely new meaning. It is no longer about filling a void or completing something that feels broken. Love becomes an extension of the fullness already present within you. True love doesn't come from need. It comes from conscious choice, from the decision to share your life with someone who has also done the work to find themselves. It is not a constant struggle to hold on to someone, but a harmonious partnership where both people grow individually and together without losing their essence. And the most beautiful part, when you reach that level of consciousness, love flows effortlessly. There's no drama, no desperate need to prove yourself, no performance required. Just presence, just alignment, just truth. So if you've ever felt that love is complicated, if you've found yourself stuck in the same painful dynamics or struggling to connect on a deeper level, remember this: the quality of your relationships does not depend on luck. It depends on your level of awareness. Change the way you relate to yourself, and you will change everything you attract into your life. Treat yourself with love, and you will attract love. Honor your worth, and others will honor it too. Choose yourself, and you will be chosen by those who can see your value without you having to beg for it. The real question isn't, when will I find the right person? It's, am I willing to become the right person for myself? Because when that happens, everything changes. Love is no longer a maze of pain and confusion. It becomes the most beautiful, liberating experience you can live. When you love yourself fully, you don't just change the way you experience love. You transform how you show up in the world. You stop begging for attention. You stop seeking external validation. You no longer need someone else to confirm what you already know, that you are enough, that you are worthy, that love should never be a battlefield or a sacrifice. This is the turning point in every person's life. The moment you stop settling for the minimum and start choosing what truly aligns with your soul. But here's the truth. Not everyone is ready for this kind of love. Many people will remain in mediocre relationships simply because it's all they've ever known. They'll choose the comfort of the familiar over the challenge of growth. And that's okay. Every person is on their own journey. But if you've made it this far, if you're still listening, it's because something inside you has already shifted. Deep down, you know you're meant for something greater, something real, something sacred. Real love isn't something you chase. It's something you magnetize when you've done the inner work. And this work never ends. Personal growth is a lifelong journey. There will always be shadows to face, wounds to heal, beliefs to challenge. But every step you take toward your truth is a step toward a fuller, freer, more aligned life. You don't need to change anyone. You don't need to convince anyone to love you. You just need to be fully, unapologetically yourself, without fear, without masks, without settling. Now, it's your turn to decide. Will you keep repeating the same patterns, hoping that someone else will change? Or will you choose to change from within and become the person who is truly ready to live a deep, healthy, conscious love? It's not about luck. It's not about fate. It's about energy. It's about raising your vibration, expanding your self-awareness, and cultivating a love for yourself so profound that the love you experience becomes a direct reflection of all that inner work. If this message resonated with you, if you believe it could help someone else, share it. There are so many people still trapped in relationships that harm them. So many who still think love is meant to hurt. They don't know there's another way to live it. And maybe this is the message they've been waiting for. The message that finally wakes them up and gives them the courage to take that first step toward real change. So leave a comment. Tell me, what part of this message touched your heart the most? What are you ready to do differently in your life? And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss the next message. Every time you interact, when you like, comment, or share, you help this message reach more people. You help more hearts awaken, more lives transform, because every single person deserves a love that expands them, a love that nourishes them, a love that never asks them to betray who they truly are. Remember, the love you're searching for is already inside you. And when you truly discover it, when you fully embrace it, the love that shows up in your life is simply a reflection of all that you've already become. See you in the next video. Throughout life, we encounter people who, in one way or another, leave a lasting mark on our story. Some teach us the true meaning of love, loyalty, and genuine connection, enriching our journey with moments of joy, understanding, and mutual growth. Others, however, seem to appear solely to remind us of the bitter taste of disappointment, betrayal, and emotional exhaustion. But what happens when we cling to someone who does not value us? Why is it so difficult to let go of those who clearly do not reciprocate our feelings in the way we deserve? Carl Jung provided a profound answer to this question. He argued that it is not merely about the other person, but rather about what that connection reflects within ourselves. The human unconscious operates through symbols and repetitive patterns, shaping the experiences we attract into our lives. If you have ever felt that you keep drawing in the same kind of harmful relationships or find yourself stuck in dynamics where you give far more than you receive, this is not a coincidence. It is a manifestation of your unconscious mind, projecting unresolved inner conflicts onto your external world. This is why letting go is so crucial. It is not just an external act of releasing someone from your life. It is a deep and transformative process of self-discovery. When you insist on holding on to something that clearly drains you, what you are truly doing is ignoring a lesson your own soul is trying to teach you. Think of all those moments when deep inside you knew a relationship was not serving you, yet you stayed. Maybe you justified their behavior, convinced yourself that with time they would change, or believed that if you just tried a little harder, they would finally see your worth. The hard truth is that the problem is not in the other person, but in what that relationship activates within you. Jung explained that our most complicated relationships are often a reflection of our shadow, the hidden aspects of our personality that we refuse to acknowledge. The shadow is not inherently negative, but when we deny its existence, it controls us from the depths of our unconscious. If, deep down, you feel that you are not worthy enough, if you believe that love must be fought for, that you need to prove your worth to be loved, then you will inevitably attract situations that reinforce this belief. Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." So what happens when you finally decide to let go? The moment you choose to release what no longer serves you, you take control of your own story. You realize that you are not destined to suffer for love or beg for scraps of affection. You are the one who decides whether to remain in a draining battle or take a step toward your true evolution. It is natural to feel fear when facing the idea of letting go. After all, our psyche is wired to cling to what is familiar, even when that familiarity causes us pain. The uncertainty of the unknown can be terrifying, but Jung taught us that real growth only occurs when we confront our inner darkness. Letting go of someone who does not value you is, at its core, an act of self-love. It is telling your unconscious mind, "I recognize myself, I respect myself, and I choose relationships that align with my true worth." To let go does not mean to hate, nor does it mean to wish harm upon the other person. It means freeing yourself from the need to fit into a story where you clearly do not belong. It means giving yourself the opportunity to create new experiences in which you are genuinely seen and appreciated for who you are, without having to force anything. As you move forward on this journey, you will discover that when you release what is not meant for you, your energy shifts. And with that shift, the people and circumstances you attract into your life also begin to change. Synchronicity, a key concept in Jung's theory, teaches us that nothing in life happens by mere chance. Every relationship, every encounter, every painful breakup carries a deeper meaning. If a relationship has pushed you to your limits, if it has made you question your self-worth, it is because something within you needs healing. And often, that healing can only happen when you have the courage to say, "Enough." Your unconscious mind is always communicating with you, sending signals and messages. But too often, we ignore them because we are too busy justifying our pain. We tell ourselves that we might be overreacting, that love requires sacrifice, that if we just hold on a little longer, everything will improve. But the truth is, love is not about constant struggle, nor is it about proving your worth. True love, the kind that nurtures and expands your soul, flows naturally. If you have to convince someone to value you, then you are simply not in the right place. It is time to start trusting that inner voice, the intuition we have silenced so many times. Your unconscious already knows what you need, but it is up to you to take the necessary steps. Ask yourself, what do I truly deserve? If your answer is genuine love, respect, and reciprocity, then start moving in the direction of those experiences. Stop holding on to what is breaking you. Let go with confidence, with gratitude for the lessons learned, and with the certainty that what is coming next is infinitely better. When you decide to release, something within you changes on a profound level. You are no longer trying to fit into a mold that does not belong to you, nor are you exhausting yourself by seeking breadcrumbs of affection from someone who was never willing to offer you more. At that moment, a psychological phenomenon occurs, what Jung described as the integration of the shadow. That part of you that once begged for love, that searched for validation in the wrong places, begins to be illuminated by consciousness. And when you bring awareness to your patterns, you are no longer a prisoner to them. People often resist letting go because they believe they will lose something valuable. But ask yourself, how valuable can something truly be if it makes you feel unworthy? Carl Jung once said that unnecessary suffering is a choice. Often, we cling to pain out of fear. Fear of what comes next. Fear of the unknown. Our mind creates an illusion, a false narrative that convinces us that a certain relationship is all we have left, that without that person, we will never find anything better. But this is nothing more than a deception, a trick of the ego, a distortion from the unconscious that keeps us bound to something we intuitively know is not good for us. This is where Jung's concept of individuation comes into play, one of his most profound and transformative ideas. Individuation is the process of recognizing your intrinsic worth, of no longer defining yourself through the eyes of others. It is the understanding that you do not need external validation to feel complete. It is a journey towards authenticity, a path of self-discovery where you realize that the most important love you will ever experience does not come from another person. It comes from within you. But this journey cannot begin if you remain attached to a story that no longer serves you. It's fascinating how often we cling to toxic or one-sided relationships, hoping that the other person will change, that one day they will wake up and recognize our worth. Yet, if you examine this desire closely, you will see that the longing to be acknowledged by someone who does not truly appreciate us is merely a reflection of a much deeper wound within ourselves. Why do we seek validation from those who disregard us? Why do we feel the need for someone else's approval to believe that we are enough? Jung explained that these patterns stem from unresolved wounds in our psyche, wounds often formed during childhood. Perhaps we learned to associate love with sacrifice. Perhaps at some point in our lives, we were taught that we must struggle for affection, that love must be earned rather than received freely. But here is the truth. Real love does not require suffering. The right person will not make you feel like you have to fight for their attention. If you are in a relationship where you constantly feel the need to prove your worth, that is a clear sign that this connection is misaligned with your essence. Letting go of someone who does not value you is not only an act of self-love, it is an act of psychological maturity. It signifies that you have reached a level of awareness where you recognize that you cannot continue investing your energy in something that only drains you. It means understanding that your time, your love, and your presence are gifts, and not everyone deserves access to them. Because once you recognize your own worth, the dynamics begin to shift. You no longer settle for the bare minimum. You no longer chase after those who do not wish to stay. You stop trying to fit into spaces that make you feel small. Instead, you become someone who consciously chooses the type of relationships they want in their life. More often than not, the fear of loneliness is what prevents people from letting go. But Jung taught that solitude is not the enemy. The real danger lies in disconnection from oneself. You can be surrounded by people and still feel utterly alone if you lack a deep connection with yourself. On the other hand, when you cultivate that connection, when you truly know yourself, solitude ceases to be a problem. You no longer crave external validation. You no longer depend on another's presence to feel whole. And in that state, relationships transform. They are no longer a desperate need, but a conscious choice. You are with someone not because you need them, but because you genuinely choose them. From a place of wholeness, not from a place of lack. Transformation begins the moment you stop focusing on what you have lost and start seeing what you have gained. Right now, it may feel like letting go is the most painful thing you could do. But what if, in reality, it is the step that will lead you to a more authentic life? Jung would say that all profound change is accompanied by an internal crisis, and that is exactly what you are experiencing. The discomfort of stepping out of an emotional comfort zone that, although harmful, was familiar. But this discomfort is temporary. It is the necessary process of rebirth, of reconstructing yourself from a place of self-love and awareness. Think of it this way. Every time you hold on to someone who does not value you, you are closing the door to those who would. As long as you continue investing your energy in a relationship that is not meant for you, there will be no space for something better to enter your life. The universe does not bring new opportunities when you are still clinging to the past. Letting go is not a loss. It is a liberation. It is an act of faith in yourself, in your ability to attract healthy relationships, in your right to be loved the way you deserve. The biggest mistake you can make is waiting for someone else to change in order for your life to improve. Jung taught that true transformation always starts from within. So instead of waiting for another person to suddenly realize your worth, begin valuing yourself enough to close that chapter. Because when you recognize your own worth, everything in your life begins to change. The people who once ignored your presence suddenly notice your absence. Those who took your love for granted start to realize what they lost. But by then, it is no longer about them. It is about you, your growth, your new perspective on life. And this is where something extraordinary happens. When you finally let go, when you release what was never meant for you, the universe responds. New opportunities begin to appear. Genuine connections start to enter your life. And what once felt like an unbearable void transforms into a space filled with potential and renewal. Not because someone else came to fill it, but because now you fill that space with self-love, with authenticity, with the certainty that you deserve something better. Never underestimate the power of a single decision. When you choose to let go, you are not just freeing yourself from a relationship that no longer serves you. You are taking the first step toward becoming a new version of yourself. A version that no longer settles for less than what they deserve. A version that no longer begs for love. A version that no longer needs to convince anyone of their worth. Because when you truly know yourself and love yourself, life begins to reflect that love back to you in everything that surrounds you. When you make the decision to let go, a part of you will resist. The ego will try to cling to the story you have built, to the illusion of what could have been, to the hope that if you just wait long enough, things will change. But time does not change people. People change when they choose to. And if someone has not shown the intention to value you by now, waiting will only cost you more of what you have already given away. Carl Jung explained that attachment to a relationship that no longer serves us is not just an emotional bond. It is a reflection of a much deeper internal struggle. You are not merely fighting for the relationship itself. You are battling against an unconscious belief that has been deeply ingrained in your psyche. This belief tells you that without this person, you are not valuable enough, that your worth depends on their presence, on their validation. But the truth is that your worth has never been dictated by another's gaze. Your value has always existed within you, but perhaps you have not yet learned to recognize it because you have spent too much time searching for it in the wrong places, in the eyes of those who could never truly see you. When you let go, you free yourself from this internal war. You no longer need to prove anything or justify your love through unnecessary sacrifices. On the contrary, the act of letting go transforms into an act of supreme self-love. It is the moment when you finally choose yourself. It is the realization that you no longer have to wait for someone else to notice you when you have the power to see yourself. True connection is never forced, never begged for, never demanded. It happens naturally when two souls resonate with each other, when both freely choose to be present without conditions or expectations. There is something profoundly powerful that happens when you decide to take this step. You stop living according to what the other person does or does not do, and instead you begin to reclaim your own energy, the energy you had invested in someone else, the energy you had wasted on worries, on trying to fit in, on attempting to salvage what was never meant to be saved. And when that energy returns to you, something transformative occurs. You start to see clearly. You become aware of how much you had been denying yourself in your desperate attempt to hold on to something that was never truly yours. But beyond that realization, you begin to open yourself up to new possibilities. Synchronicity, the fundamental principle Jung described as the way the universe guides us through meaningful coincidences, becomes evident in your life. New people appear, unexpected opportunities arise, and you start to see that life was never against you. It was simply waiting for you to find the courage to release the old so that the new could take its place. But none of this can happen if you remain trapped in the same story. If you continue to pour your energy into a place where it is not appreciated. There is no greater act of power than saying enough when something no longer resonates with you. Not out of bitterness, not out of resentment, but out of the deep awareness that you deserve better. This is where many people struggle. They believe that letting go is a passive act, that it means surrendering to loss. But letting go is not about losing. It is about gaining. It is about gaining freedom, gaining space for what truly belongs to you, gaining a version of yourself that no longer clings to what causes pain. Jung once said that there is no awakening of consciousness without pain, and letting go does hurt. It hurts because it means saying goodbye to a part of your life, to a bond in which you invested time, love, and hope. But that pain is temporary. What is eternal is the peace that follows, the lightness that comes from no longer carrying a relationship that did not flow, a love that was not reciprocated, a story that existed only in your mind but never fully materialized in reality. And in this process of letting go, something incredible happens. You rediscover yourself. You realize that you can be alone without feeling lonely, that you can look at yourself in the mirror without needing someone else's approval, that you are enough, not because someone tells you so, but because you have come to understand it from the depths of your being. And when you reach this point, everything changes. You no longer settle for less. You no longer tolerate what you once endured. You no longer allow the fear of solitude to keep you in places where you are not valued. That is the true meaning of letting go. It is not simply releasing a person, it is releasing the version of yourself that believed you had to fight for love, that thought love had to be earned through suffering and struggle. It is saying goodbye to fear, to lack, to emotional dependence. It is a rebirth, a transformation into someone who chooses from a place of abundance rather than from a place of desperation. Jung taught us that the most important relationship we will ever have is the one we have with ourselves. And when that relationship is strong, when you truly know and value yourself, you will never again have to beg for love, because you will finally understand that what is truly meant for you will never require you to chase it. It will come naturally, effortlessly, without struggle, without depletion. Letting go is not giving up. It is having the courage to recognize that you deserve more. It is taking a step into the unknown with the faith that what lies ahead is far better than what you are leaving behind. And when you finally do this, when you make the decision to close that chapter, you realize that true self-love is not just about saying affirmations in the mirror. It is about the choices you make every single day. And the most powerful choice you can ever make is to choose yourself over any relationship that fails to value you. When you finally choose yourself, when you decide to let go of what is hurting you, something profound happens inside of you. The energy that was once trapped in struggle, in uncertainty, in the hope that someone else would change, returns to you with a newfound strength. It is as if the heavy burden you had been carrying suddenly lifts, allowing you to breathe again. And in that moment, you realize that it was never the relationship that bound you. It was the belief that without it, you would be incomplete. The fear of letting go does not come from the loss itself, but from the mistaken idea that without this person, you will not find anything as good or better. But here is the truth. When you release what does not value you, you create space for what truly does. Letting go is an act of faith. Faith in yourself. Faith in the flow of life. Faith in the certainty that what is meant for you will arrive at the right moment without force, without struggle, without resistance. But for this to happen, you must first have the courage to close the door that keeps you trapped in a place where you are no longer happy. Carl Jung spoke extensively about the process of individuation as the path toward the wholeness of the self. This journey is not just about self-discovery, it's about integration, about learning to embrace every part of who you are, both the light and the shadow. And a crucial aspect of this path involves learning to let go, releasing without fear, trusting that what leaves your life is not a loss, but a redirection. Every time someone walks away from your life, every time a relationship comes to an end, a door opens for deep introspection. Instead of clinging to what was, you have an opportunity to ask yourself, what is this experience revealing about me? Perhaps it's showing you that you still struggle to set boundaries, that you continue to seek validation in the wrong places, or that there are wounds within you that need healing before you can truly attract a love that aligns with your worth. When you resist letting go, what you're really doing is prolonging your own suffering. You hold on to an idealized version of what could have been, to a future that exists only in your mind, to the belief that if you just try harder, everything will change. But the truth is, love should never feel like a battle where you're the only one fighting. Love is not meant to be a constant struggle. If someone cannot see your value, if they are unwilling to walk beside you with respect and reciprocity, then that person is not meant to stay in your life. And that's okay. Not everyone is destined to be a permanent part of your journey. But that does not mean you should cling to those who have already shown you, through their actions, that they cannot or will not give you what you need. The real issue is not the person who fails to appreciate you. It's what you choose to do with that reality. You can continue waiting, making excuses, and turning a blind eye to the truth. Or you can choose to honor yourself, to stop investing your energy in something that does not nourish you, to create space in your life for relationships that genuinely add value to your existence. Sometimes, the fear of letting go stems from the idea that we will be alone. But Jung taught us that true loneliness is not the absence of someone else. It is the disconnection from our own being. There are people who are constantly surrounded by others, yet they still feel empty because external company cannot fill the void left by an inauthentic connection. The only thing that truly fills that emptiness is your connection with yourself, with your purpose, your essence, your truth. When you choose to let go, you send a powerful message to your subconscious that you trust yourself, that you choose yourself, that you do not need to hold on to a relationship that diminishes you in order to feel whole. And the moment you do that, everything begins to align. Life responds to the energy you put out. When you operate from a place of need, of lack, of fear, you attract more of the same. But when you radiate security, self-worth, and the unwavering conviction that you deserve better, the people who enter your life will reflect that same energy back to you. Love is not suffering. Love is not constant sacrifice. Love does not require you to shrink yourself in order to make someone else comfortable. Real love is free, expansive, and a space where you can be your true self without fear of being not enough. If you have ever felt that you needed to change in order to be loved, if you have felt that you were giving far more than you were receiving, then that is not the right relationship for you. And that doesn't mean you should blame the other person or hold on to resentment. It simply means that it's time to let go, to release, to trust that what is ahead will be far greater than what you are leaving behind. Jung believed that the unconscious constantly sends us signals, but often we choose not to listen. How many times have you felt deep inside that something wasn't right? That quiet whisper within you, telling you that a certain relationship, a certain situation, is not meant for you, yet you ignore it? That is your intuition speaking. That is your unconscious mind trying to reveal to you what you do not want to see. But there comes a moment when you can no longer look away from the truth. And when you finally choose to face it, when you decide to act in alignment with it, everything changes. It is natural to feel sadness when something ends. It is human to miss what once was, to wonder what might have been if things had played out differently. But do not get stuck in that thought. Do not idealize what has already ended. Instead, shift your focus to everything you can build from this moment forward. See the opportunity in front of you, the opportunity to create healthier relationships, to learn from your experiences, to evolve into the person you are meant to become. Letting go does not mean forgetting. It does not mean denying what you have lived. It simply means choosing your peace over a love that does not serve you. It means trusting that pain is temporary, but liberation is permanent. It means understanding that what feels like a loss today will, in time, be recognized as the beginning of something far greater. When you look back, you will realize that every time you release something that no longer aligned with you, something better took its place. Maybe not immediately. Maybe you had to go through a period of rebuilding. But in the end, everything fell into place in the best possible way. And this time will be no different. This time, too, you will find clarity. You will find peace. You will find the certainty that you made the right decision. The key is to trust. Trust in yourself. Trust in your intuition. Trust in the knowing that what is truly meant for you will never make you question your worth. Do not fear letting go. Do not fear closing a door, because by doing so, you are opening yourself up to everything you genuinely deserve. When you finally release, when you consciously decide to stop investing your energy in what does not appreciate you, something within you shifts permanently. The peace you have been searching for, in others' validation, in the hope that someone would change, begins to emerge from within. You realize that you never needed anyone else's approval to feel whole. Because wholeness does not come from outside. It is the love you choose to give yourself. And it is in that moment that you finally understand Jung's greatest lesson. Every experience we have in relationships is nothing more than a reflection of our relationship with ourselves. If you have clung to someone who does not value you, it is because, on some level, you have not fully valued yourself. But now, with this new awareness, with this deeper understanding of your own being, you can no longer go back. You have changed. You have evolved. And now, you can see with absolute clarity what you once refused to accept. By letting go, you are not only freeing the other person, you are freeing yourself. You are releasing the weight of expecting someone else to make you happy. You are ceasing to search for love outside of yourself and beginning to cultivate it within. And when you do that, when you truly choose yourself, your entire world transforms. You no longer attract love from a place of need, but from a place of abundance. The fear of loneliness dissolves because you recognize that you have never truly been alone. You have always had the most important person with you, yourself. And in this process of reconstruction, of rediscovery, you begin to see how everything in your life starts to shift. Your energy changes, your choices become more intentional, and the people who enter your life do so because they align with this new version of you. What once hurt you now becomes a lesson, a memory of who you were and what you will no longer tolerate. Now, you have the power to inspire others, because there are so many people, just like you, who have felt the pain of holding on to something that was never meant for them. If this message resonated with you, then surely someone else out there needs to hear it too. Share this with others. Leave a comment below. Tell me what part of this message spoke to your soul. What decision are you ready to make today? Let's build a community centered on self-love and consciousness, where we understand that letting go is not losing. It is gaining something far greater, the freedom to be who we truly are. You took an important step today by listening to this message. Now the next step is yours. Are you ready to choose yourself? See you in the next video.